world of sports, all sports, here at 10:40 on the WHO Saturday Sports Line.
5:17 in the afternoon, and it gives us very great pleasure to welcome the living legend to the airwaves of WHO Saturday Sports Line. Bud Wilkinson is now with us, the former head coach at the University of Oklahoma, also a former color commentator on some of WHO Saturday Sports Line. Are you looking forward to the football season?
Yes, I always look forward to the football season, and as the seasons in certain sports seem to extend themselves, something that I truly look forward to.
Who are you picking as the national champion right now, Bud? Or is it too early?
Whoever goes undefeated.
That's seeming to be a more difficult proposition for teams every year.
Yeah, the best teams in the country, I think you can pick them out fairly easily. You know, the Washington's going to be awfully good out in the Pacific Coast. Texas will be very strong in the Southwest Conference. Oklahoma and Nebraska, always good. With Iowa State, I've got to say, coming along very well, too. Penn State in the East will be good. Alabama will be good. Last year, Clemson surprised everybody, so you never know.
Bud Wilkinson is our guest during this segment of WHO Saturday Sports Line. The local line, 282-5111. If you're calling from elsewhere in the state, the toll-free Watts line is available to you at 1-800-532-1111. Outside the state, 515-282-5120, and that call must be prepaid. Bud, over your career at Oklahoma, which I believe spans 17 years, we were talking about the record. I believe it's something like 247 wins, 25 losses, and some ties. What do you consider was the reason for your success at Oklahoma, outside of obviously having some great players?
Well, I think that was really the major factor. The recruiting situation it's always been an important thing, but it's become much more difficult with the ease of transportation now. Most of the years that I was at Oklahoma were before the jet age, and you really didn't have players that were, well, let me put it this way. At Oklahoma, I think we had 6 players that actually lived further than 180 miles from the campus at Norman during the years I was there. So we were a very local team, and I think that helped a great deal, too, because these young men had sort of grown up knowing about Oklahoma and the Sooners, and it was kind of a culmination of a hope and a dream to someday be able to play for them.
Coach, you ran into some other great coaches during your time down for over at Missouri. Could you talk about some of the coaches and what you may have learned from them?
Well, I had the good fortune to spend a year in Iowa, at Iowa City, during World War II. In 1943, I was in the Navy pre-flight program and was on the coaching staff for the Iowa Seahawks. This is ancient history for most people, but Don Perot was the head coach. And I had been a football coach, played at Minnesota, and had coached at Syracuse, and then back at Minnesota prior to World War II. We'd always been a single wing team and a short punt team. We'd had some very fine teams at Minnesota when I was playing. However, the split tee was a really new concept in football. The plays themselves were not different, but the fact that you split the entire line spread the defense. The principle was old. All of the teams, New Rockne's teams, split the end out about a yard from the tackle. But it was a new concept to split the guard away from the center and the tackle away from the guard, and then the end away from the tackle. So you had a situation develop where you didn't need to move people. You already had them spread out, and if you could occupy them, keep them where they were, you had some room to run.
Talking about Oklahoma's offensive formations now, Bud, does the broken bone variation of the wishbone try to do the same thing?
Well, the wishbone is, in and of itself, very much like the split tee. The thing that is different about it, and was, again, just a mutation, but a great concept that Darrell Royal had, you have the so-called handoff play on the split tee. That hits so fast, so quickly, that you really couldn't option it. We used to try to do it, but you were so close to the end, by the time you got there, you really couldn't make the option. Bill Yeoman was the first one, I think, to go with a triple option, and he did it from what looks like a split-back formation, but he moved the halfbacks from behind the tackles to splitting the outside foot of the offensive guard, which means don't want to get too technical here, but it means they're about a yard and a half laterally closer to the center. So the quarterback can get the ball to him and still read the defensive tackle. What Darrell did setting up the wishbone was to move his fullback up a couple of steps, and now you have an immediate mesh where the quarterback opens up in his first step and the fullback is there, and the quarterback's got plenty of time to read the tackle, and if the tackle is going to come in and force the play, the quarterback will keep the ball and go to the next option. If the tackle goes across to in any way protect or anything wide, then he lets the fullback have the ball. So these were just sort of progressive ideas, but when you break the bone, as you said, that doesn't mean you're going to snap the ball from that formation. Sometimes you do, and that gives you an additional pass receiver who can get out quickly. But if you don't snap the ball until you pick somebody up in motion, the man that you have detached, you snap the ball when he's back in the wishbone. So it gives you more possibilities.
That's right. Sometimes that player comes in motion before the snap. 2825111, the local line. Toll-free Watts line, 1-800-532-1111. And our long-distance line is area code 515-282-5120. Bud, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I would be interested in your comparisons of your football teams at Oklahoma versus the Oklahoma teams of right now, Barry Switzer, and of the prior coach, Chuck Fairbanks. Now, that's a very general question, I realize. You can do just about anything you want to with it, so go ahead.
The thing that has happened in football that I don't particularly think is good for the college game is the two-platoon system of playing. The years that I coached at Oklahoma, the substitution rule changed a number of times, but most of those years it was a one-platoon game, which meant that the man had to play both offense and defense. And most of the time your kicker had to be a player, not a specialist. I think the game is better that way because it has a far greater effect really related to the physical condition of the team, the willingness to play when you're tired, and then the fact that you've got to be a good athlete. The specialist here, I guess the best way I can say it quickly is that if you've got a man who can run 4.5 as a wide receiver, he's a great threat, and he may catch a lot of passes, some of them touchdown bombs. If he has to play defense, then you have a totally different situation, and how many wide receivers would play if they also had to play defense is the point that I'm trying to make. I think the two-platoon has added pressure to recruiting, and that's the big problem of the game, and I think that it really has changed coaching because you now are working with people to enhance a skill they already have. And when it was a one-platoon game, you had to teach them how to play everything and develop skills that they didn't really have. So coaching was a different proposition then.
I take it then, Bud, that you perceive some problems in recruiting, and I'm wondering if you have any proposed solutions.
Well, the only solution I would have is I think if you'd go back to one platoon, you would eliminate all the specialists type of recruiting. Now, that would not necessarily mean you wouldn't have pressure recruiting for the good athlete. But right now, if you don't have maybe 4, 5, 6 people who weigh 260 and up, you're not going to have an offensive line that's going to be very competitive. And the same thing is true. You go right through all the positions. Your tight end has got to be somebody who weighs somewhere around 220 in that general area. But whether these people could turn around and play defensively is the point that is moot here. And I don't believe that the majority of them probably would be playing. And I think you'd have a different type athlete, which I think would enhance the game considerably.
We're visiting with Bud Wilkinson, the former great Oklahoma college football coach. Also now he's a color commentator for ESPN broadcast. Let's go ahead and take a phone call for Bud. Go ahead, you're on the air.
Yeah, I'd like to talk to Bud about the Texas-Oklahoma feud, in their games in particular, and plus also I'd like to have him comment on Darrell Royal when he was in the early to mid-'70s, always complaining that Oklahoma was cheating and spying and everything like that, and I'd like to have him enlighten us on that subject.
Well, the Oklahoma-Texas game is one of the great rivalries in the country, and the thing that makes it unique is the fact that it is played in the Cotton Bowl in Dallas, which is 180 miles from Norman, and it's 180 miles from Austin. The other thing that makes it unique is that normally in a college football game, 90% of the crowd is for the home team, and 10% is for the visiting team, or 5%. In the average bowl game, over half the crowd really doesn't care who wins or loses. They've just come to see the game. But the Texas-Oklahoma game, you can just divide the stadium right in half, and everybody is highly partisan, so every time the ball is snapped, one half of the stadium is happy. And that excitement builds, and what makes the game... I really was not involved enough with the dispute that Darrell and Barry Switzer had relative to scouting the Texas team and that sort of thing to make any intelligent comment about it.
Okay, now, on NFL player salaries, now I want to know your ideas on the new football league and its draft in December and whether it's signed in January. How much money do you think they'll have to offer to get those players to sign up early before the NFL draft? And do you think the NFL players are basically underpaid in comparison with basketball and baseball?
Well, it depends on which team they're playing for. There's a great discrepancy in the salary level among various teams. I don't feel that they're underpaid. I don't think that they're perhaps making as much money comparably as some of the men in other sports. The tennis players, if you're a good one right now, you're making a tremendous amount of money. The most overlooked athlete from the standpoint of money being made is by jockeys. They get their share of the purse, and if you're a Willie Shoemaker, you're making a tremendous amount of money. The new league, I don't think, intends to try to compete with the NFL player, potential NFL player. There'll be some people, of course, who may go either way, but fundamentally they're going to have a regional draft, which will hopefully have their teams made up from the standpoint of the basic part of the team, of the men who played in that collegiate area, so that the fans already know them and so forth. The advantage that they do have, this is going to be from the standpoint of academic standards and young men finishing school. But if you play with the NFL, you don't get paid until the season begins. If you want to go to the new league, you're going to start getting paid when they play their first game. So you have moved up your payroll about 6 months, which I think will be attractive to some young men.
Our guest during this segment of WHO Saturday Sports Line is, I guess, one of the living legends of football, Mr. Bud Wilkinson. Our lines are open, 282-5111 locally, 1-800-532-1111, the toll-free statewide Watts line. Back in a moment.
The best high school football players in the state meet in the annual North-South Shrine All-Star Football Game, Saturday, August 7th. WHO Sports Radio will bring you every exciting play live from Drake Stadium in Des Moines starting at 1:30 as part of Saturday Sports Line. Join WHO Sports Director Jim Zabel and the top high school football players in the state in this annual classic. That's the North versus the South in the annual Shrine All-Star Football Game, Saturday, August 7th at 1:30 on WHO Sports Radio.
They call the retirement years the golden years, but there are times when they can be anything but that. If you have a home, there's the lawn, utility bills, property taxes, and perhaps those stairs aren't quite as easy as they used to be. The retirement years should be enjoyable, and that's why you're invited to visit Macaulay Terrace Apartments open house Sunday, August 1st from 2 till 5. Macaulay Terrace offers a real alternative in retirement lifestyles, offering both independence and security. Enjoy the privacy of your own home without all the work and headaches. Secure in the knowledge that help is nearby if you should need it. Each Macaulay Terrace apartment has an all-electric kitchen, wall-to-wall carpeting, and more. There's also a community dining room, barber, beauty, and gift shops. Located in the planned community of Green Meadows, Macaulay Terrace offers freedom, security, and comfort. Visit Macaulay Terrace during their open house Sunday, August 1st from 2 till 5. Macaulay Terrace, a division of the Bishop Drum Retirement Center. They can make sure your golden years are the best of your life.
28 before 6 on WHO Saturday Sports Line. Larry Cutler and Mike Lee, your co-hosts this afternoon. We're speaking with Bud Wilkinson, the former great Oklahoma head football coach who also coached the St. Louis Football Cardinals in the National Football League and now is a color commentator for college football on ESPN. Bud, what has been responsible in your eyes for the increasing popularity of college football?
Well, I think the 30-player recruiting limit on scholarship men that you can sign each year has definitely made the game more competitive. The teams that have great tradition and great background seem to continue to have a slight advantage, but that seems to be changing. In the Big Ten, for example, it was Ohio State and Michigan dominating it across the board for as long back almost as I can remember, and then this year Iowa wins. And Wisconsin was in there fighting for the championship for a while. So anytime you have broadened the base of competition related to who might win a championship, I think you have fan interest increasing. Then I think television has helped popularize the game. And then always college football is kind of a rallying point for alumni and students, so it all comes together.
What about talk of a playoff system to determine a national champion? Do you think that would work?
Yes, I think it would, and I think someday it will happen. I think that you begin it. Basketball, when it began, I think there were 16 teams that were invited to the NCAA tournament, and now I got something like 43. I don't remember. I saw something the other day. They were going to enlarge the number again this year. The format would change a little bit, but the format that I've always believed in for openers would be very, very easy to accomplish. You have 6 major conferences, and the conference champion would be in the playoffs in those 6 conference areas. Then you'd have 2 at-large teams. That would be the Penn States, the Notre Dames, other teams that don't belong to a conference but still are major powers. So you begin with 8 teams. You play the first game the first Saturday in September. You play the semifinals the second Saturday in December. And then you have the finals the third Saturday, which means you have the playoffs over prior to Christmas. Now you could go ahead with you, and everybody said, well, the major bowls won't want to have anybody when the championship's already been decided. But if you look at who goes to the major bowl games, most of them aren't deciding anything anyway. It's just a very good college football game between 2 very good teams. And the other part of this that I think is important to the future of college football is that if you want to be very frank about it, there is competition both for television revenues and for gate receipts with professional football. The colleges really pick up great momentum, but not really until after the World Series. People get divided loyalties there when the college season begins and the baseball season's still on. But between the end of the World Series and Thanksgiving Day, college football really is coming into its increasing popularity. And then you just declare a halt, and the pros now come in with their playoffs. And then the colleges come back strong during the holidays, and particularly on New Year's Day. But they've got a void in there of the 3 weeks that I just described, where if they were having a college playoff, it would be immensely popular.
Well, one of the arguments that I've heard against going to a playoff system is strictly pragmatic, and that is simply the fact that the major bowls offer the participating schools so much money, and they have so much money behind them to offer that they would probably be able to quash any sort of playoff proposal that would come up.
People that I know in television, and I know several of them very well, the value of the playoff system that I've described would be greater to the participating schools in the conferences than what they get now from the bowls.
And has this fact then, according to you, I guess, been presented to the schools? And if so, what have these schools said?
Well, no, it's been presented to the NCAA, and it's been kicked around for years. I was at a meeting in Colorado Springs, I think, 15 years ago to have discuss about the possibility of an NCAA playoff. And all of the bowls were there, and the bowls all talk about exploitation of the athlete, too long a season. Our games are played during vacation. They go through all of those things, all of which is true. And I don't question the validity of their argument, but how many games do the basketball teams play? How many games do baseball teams play? The college football season, when I was a player, was 8 games is all. And we wanted to play a lot more games. You've now got it extended to 11. If you play in a bowl game, you now play 12 games. If you went through the playoffs, you'd have an 11-game season, and if you went to the championships, it would be 14 games. You're not taking anything that compares with the time away from class that any other sport, but football does. Football takes less time away from class than any college sport.
Well, I can't understand then, but if this thing has been kicked around for years and it's a plain fact that the schools could get more money out of the playoff system than they could from the bowls, what's holding this thing up?
I guess, built-in tradition of the bowls and the strength that the bowls have. The College Football Association probably is a good example. All of the major schools belong to this new organization, except the Big Ten and the Pac-10. And the Big Ten and Pac-10 have not joined, and I don't know why, but what I have been told is that the Rose Bowl is so valuable, they don't want to have any problem coming up that would in any way disturb the lock that they have on the Rose Bowl. I think that the College Football Association has been a very positive force. I don't mean to imply that I'm opposed to the NCAA. I'm totally a supporter of the NCAA. But I feel that in the past, the football, which has generated the revenues, has not had the proper representation in the way the votes have been taken. Now, that's been rectified with the division setup that the NCAA has adopted, but they have done this as a reaction to the necessity as presented by the College Football Association.
We're visiting with Bud Wilkinson on WHO Saturday Sports Line. 282-5111 is our local line for Des Moines and surrounding suburbs. 1-800-532-1111, the toll-free statewide Watts line. Outside the state, 515-282-5120. Bud, you went into the pro coaching ranks a few years back to take over the reins of the St. Louis Cardinals. As you now look back, what was the difference found in college football?
Well, the circumstance really is totally different. You have people who are great athletes, and they want to win. And I think it's easier to coach pro players than college players because they are in the game because of the hoped financial rewards that they will receive, and they're totally dedicated. The problem in professional football, from a coaching standpoint, is the whole setup related to how that team is operated and who really is calling the shots, who's making the decisions that relate to who will be available to coach once the season begins. And I don't mean to kind of muddy the water as I put it that way, but it's a complicated thing. Let me just give you one quick example. Jack Pardee, who was with Washington, the Redskins coach, got in an argument with their new director of player personnel, and Pardee lost his job. The personnel that you have are the controlling factor as to what kind of a team you will have. And that's the difference between college football and professional football. You know the college player is going to be there for 4 years, and there's a constant turnover, and you don't always have the strength that you have. In professional football, if you lack a particular position, there are a group of names on a computer, and you try to pick one that hopefully is better than somebody else that you have. But who makes the personnel choices before the coaching begins is the vital difference.
How about pressures to win, comparing college athletics to professional athletics?
I don't think they're a whole lot different. The college situation perhaps is a little less, but that would depend on the background of the particular school. There are some schools that are used to winning, and if you happen to be coaching one of those institutions, at first you're very lucky to get a chance to coach at a school that's got that kind of tradition, but you have to play up to their standard of performance or expected standard of performance. And in professional football, it's no different than professional baseball or basketball or anything else. If your team is not playing well, the easy thing for the owner to do or for management to do is say, well, let's have a coaching change.
We're talking with Bud Wilkinson on WHO Saturday Sports Line. We have just a few minutes to spend with Bud, and the numbers to call, 282-5111 here in the city. The toll-free Watts line, 1-800-532-1111. Our long-distance line, area code 515-282-5120. Bud, do you have any plans to go into politics again?
No, I've been involved in politics as a supporter of people since I ran for the Senate in Oklahoma. And I was the Oklahoma National Committeeman for 6 years after I had lost the Senate race. But I got involved. George Bush is an old friend of mine, and so I was involved in the George Bush campaign, and I'm very happy that George is now the Vice President of the United States.
But if you were to describe some qualities, characteristics, what does it take to be a successful coach?
Well, I think that background is obviously where you begin, and most of the people who have done well in coaching came from a program that was very well organized, and they learned what it takes at that point in time from the personal experience of having been part of that program. You have to understand the game. You have to hopefully understand people. And I think the most important thing really is to understand the player from the standpoint of he wants to be a success, and the coach's role is to help him be as good as he can be. And some people now don't have the ambition to do what I said. They could be good, but they don't really want to pay the price. It sounds trite again, but creating an atmosphere on the field where the players know that they have an opportunity to be as good as they want to be is a very key factor. And then enter in the student body, the faculty, and the alumni. All of those things need to come together.
Bud, do you think there's more cheating in college athletics now than there was when you were a head coach at Oklahoma?
Well, since I'm not involved in it, I'm not, really able to make a qualified statement. But I would say, yeah, there's more pressure now, and I think that there's...
Well, does more pressure mean more cheating?
Yeah, there's been nearly as much cheating as people think there is. You keep hearing all of these things all the time, and yes, there is some. And the unfortunate situation out in the West Coast, which was cheating relative to grades, which to me is something that the faculty can and should and ought to control. I just can't understand how you can have people falsifying transcripts and being made eligible. That kind of cheating, never did occur before. So, and that gets back to, again, my one platoon versus two platoon thing. But I would say without being a participant, being now an informed spectator, I would say that, yeah, there's probably more pressure.
And it seems like, unfortunately, some of the athletes now coming into programs who had their hands slapped by the NCAA, seems like those are the guys who end up suffering.
Well, the unfortunate thing about the enforcement program of the NCAA, which I do support, I want to make that clear, but if a team is not winning, no one really worries about them. And those are the teams that create most of the problems because they get a little bit desperate, and they are the people who bend the rules a little bit. But if they don't win, then they don't disturb anybody. Now, when they do win, Clemson being a recent good example, all of a sudden somebody starts blowing a whistle.
A final question, Bud. Let's put you on the spot here a little bit. If you had to pick a national champion going into this coming football season, who would you select?
Washington, Texas, Alabama, Oklahoma, or Penn State.
Well, that's a pretty healthy lineup right there, Bud. And I thank you for being with us on WHO Saturday Sports Line. Wish we had more time, but we're running up against some deadlines. We need some more reports to get on here, and we'd like to thank you very much, Bud Wilkinson, for being with us this afternoon on the program. We'll have a wrap-up on the day's sporting activities and some more live reports coming up as we wind down another edition of WHO Saturday Sports Line after this break.